Okie dokie, everybody, here we are, live 10:30 for another round of Astro-Babble. Fun stuff. Okay, let's get to it. So this is the show where Sam, an astrologer, talks about astro stuff. Those of you who have been following for a while kind of know the setup. Let's go over it one more time. You have very graciously submitted your birth dates, places, and times, your exact times, as well as month and date spelled out to me via private message. And I'm going to take 8 of those charts this morning and decode them and decrypt them and talk a little bit about astrological themes that I see in the chart, what your natal placements mean, and really give you a look into what I work with clients on a daily basis. These are very short readings. These are not necessarily focused. I'm doing all of these cold, so I haven't prepped any of these charts beforehand besides just plugging the data into my software. So if you would like more information about your personal natal chart, please feel free to schedule a consult at scorpiorisingastrology.com with me. I also have astrology classes if you're interested in learning how I do what I do and that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get the ball rolling, shall we? Okie dokie. Let's look at Russell's chart first thing. Russell was born at 6:30 p.m. in Lagrange. Let's go ahead and take a peek at what's going on here. So we've got the ascendant in Libra with Jupiter here in Libra. Lovely. Always like to see Jupiter conjunct the ascendant. Somebody who has a very big personality. There is a little bit of an issue because Jupiter is retrograde, so that big personality might work against them in unexpected ways. Jupiter is still one of the luckiest planets that we can find in a chart. So the fact that that's conjoined the ascendant naturally just gets you out of a little bit of trouble, greases the wheels of fate, as it were. We do have Venus in Aries in the 7th in a sign-based opposition to the ascendant. So back when we first started doing these Astro Live videos, one of the things that I kept seeing in the first round of charts was the ruler of the ascendant opposing the ascendant in the 7th house. And this is somebody who over-identifies with relationships. So when we look at the need for love, the need to complete your life, and the end goal of life to be finding a partner, which is something that, I think as humans we can all empathize with because there's safety in numbers and we're a community-based species. I think that when I see that ascendant, that lord of the chart, and that lord of the chart in opposition, there's an over craving for partnership. So we just need to make sure that that's kept in check, especially because we have some other indicators in the chart that are a little bit not conducive to relationships working out for things like career. Because the ascendant is in Libra, Venus is in Aries, and the 10th house has Mars in Cancer, it's not an ideal situation for career to have those long-term relationships and those personality conflicts, because that friction will then impede on long-term success. We've got the moon ruling that house of career in the 5th house of creativity in Aquarius, conjoining Saturn. That's when I see Saturn and the moon together in the 5th, it's always the master of the craft that I think really comes forward with that archetype when it is related to career and success. It's very Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you've seen that documentary on Netflix, which I absolutely love, I've seen it like 12 times. It's so my aesthetic. It's exactly what I live for. But that's Saturn conjoining the moon in the 5th, ruling the 10th house of career success, is don't try to be a jack of all trades. Master one thing and do that one thing super, super well. Dive really, really deep into that one thing, and you will be set for the rest of your life because you have that specialist mentality when it comes to how you approach your work that I think is very, very rare. and it's something that can be honed and refined, but it is something that is going to take time, and that's something that is a little bit tricky because you've got Mars in the 10th, so you just want that fame now. But at the same time, when we look at how your fame is structured, how your creativity is structured, we want to make sure that it's a slow drip forged over time, a constant pounding, refiring, wetting, pounding, firing, re-wetting of that process. Yeah. Let's see. Because that Mars up in Cancer is ruling that second house of finance, there is good wealth potential in the chart, especially later on in life, past 50. And I think that that's something that the chart is already throwing up. Is, with that first Saturn return coming at 30, 28 to 30, we're going to find a lot of your skills maturing, and you're actually going to realize more and more, like, oh, this is the one thing. This is the one thing I'm really, really good at, and I really shouldn't be doing anything else. And then as that progresses, you'll start to incur that fame and that secondary monetary supplementation, because you've ripened, is a good way to say it. Unfortunately, this isn't a great chart for the first 30 years of life, because Jupiter on the ascendant is terribly awkward in a scholastic environment, and it's terribly awkward when your personality is bigger than all of your friends, and that can be a little bit difficult to control, especially with the Venus opposing the ascendant and ruling the ascendant. Relationships being tricky at first until you master that dynamic. There's just a lot. There is an over-identification with work. So a hustler is something that is a term that I think would identify Russell's chart pretty well, because the Lord of the Ascendant is ruling the sixth house of work in Pisces. We also have the Sun in Pisces here, as well as Mercury retrograde in Pisces. The day job might be a little bit confusing. The day job might be a little bit stifling. Walking into somebody else's environment where they own the business, like a corporate environment, and you work for them, can really get you down, because you do have so much talent and value, and I think you sense that over time. But that's really where that moon kicks in, and you start to understand it's not about right now. It's not about right now. It's about the skills that I'm developing and growing over time. It's that long game that your chart really is playing, as opposed to the short game of just, let me show up, punch a clock, and collect a paycheck. That's not what your chart is doing. Your chart is in it for that long haul. So as long as you identify what you're good at and take the baby steps to move for that, that's going to be really how you unlock your chart, not the instant gratification, and not dwelling on the past because you were awkward and didn't really know what you were doing. But instead, as you refine, that's going to be the streamlined process, and that's not a quick cash grab. Okie dokie. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody jumping on Instagram and Facebook live. Hello, Mona, Raven, Marie, Rick, Emily, Donna, Sandy. Hello, hello, hello. Love you, love you. Thank you, everybody, for joining on. We are going through another round of 8 charts. If you would like to submit yours, please private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time, and we will add you to the queue. We've got a couple more days worth of queue, so this is going well. This started as just a fun way to pass the time in quarantine, and now it's blossomed into its own little thing. So let's go ahead and run chart number 2, shall we? Let's take a look at Raven's chart. Raven's got a Sagittarius ascendant at 11 degrees. Yeah, Sagittarius ascendant at 11 degrees. Jupiter and Pisces in the 4th, which is great. It is stationed, so it's a slow Jupiter, not necessarily at full power, and by sign opposing Pluto and Uranus in Virgo up in the 10th, ruled by Mercury in Libra in the 11th. That's an interesting dynamic. And then we've got Sun, Moon. She's a new moon baby, just like me. So we've got Sun, Moon in Scorpio, as well as Neptune and Venus in Scorpio, all in the 12th. That's a rough break. So we've talked about this before. Uh, Whenever we see the sun or the ruler of the chart, in this case, we have the sun and the moon of the chart in the 12th house of hidden enemies. It's the idea that very quickly Raven can become her own worst enemy. And that's something that we just need to be a little bit aware of, surrounding yourself with people, places, things that are a little bit more uplifting, that are encouraging, that allow you to not get in your own head about who you think you are because you're wrong. Even with that Scorpio tendency to get to the bottom of things, you can't get to the bottom of the 12th house. You can't. And that's one of the other reasons why I don't like Scorpio in the 12th, is because Scorpio just wants to know the root of it all. It wants to know that ultimate truth. And it wants to sort through all of the garbage and all of the poison in order to get to that truth. And you can't get to the truth of the 12th because the nature of the 12th is chaos. And it's a very difficult space to navigate when we have all of that happening in the 12th. There is a really interesting juxtaposition to your chart, Raven, and I think this is one of your saving graces. Actually, is the chart has that ascendant in Sag, which puts Jupiter as the ruler of your chart. We talked in Russell's chart, having Jupiter conjunct the ascendant, you have Jupiter ruling the ascendant in the sign of its exaltation. So you've also got that lucky streak. Where you've put that lucky streak is actually in the 4th house of family. So when in doubt, go back to family. It seems like that's and because Jupiter is in the 4th, it's probably a big family. But the idea that you've got a lot of love and support and proper alignment in that space naturally, even though they might not necessarily agree with your career choices, it's something that I think it's the down that's at the it's the soft snow at the base of that long fall. It's that comfort level, that air mattress that you can just kind of plop onto and not necessarily worry. Family's got your back from that perspective. That's where the luckiest planet in your chart is located. Let's talk about Mars and Leo in the 9th, ruling all of that stuff in the 12th. So when I see the 9th and the 12th interacting, there's a potential conflict or hidden enemies or hospitalizations arising due to travel overseas. I've seen this before in clients who have been mugged overseas, clients who also in college do very poorly because they don't understand the system. It's a very difficult placement for that 9th house of travel, higher education, and foreigners to interact with that 12th house of hidden enemies, of hospitalizations, of karmic healing. So that's a connection in your life, Raven, that I think is a little bit tricky. There is a mutual reception between the Sun and Mars, though, which is mediating, but not necessarily enough. Those Scorpio tendencies, again, wanting to get to the truth of things, what you discover along the way in your higher learning process in this lifetime, I think you'll actually come up with some really dangerous stuff. You'll expose some hidden truths that people would like to stay hidden, and because of that, you might have a little bit of a target that you've painted on yourself. So we just need to be cautious. You do have Mercury and Libra ruling the 10th house, so friends are not necessarily a problem. Your relationship houses are actually pretty good. I'm very pleased with your relationship houses because we've got, again, Jupiter in the family house. We've got the 7th house of relationship ruled by Gemini, ruled by Mercury and Libra up in the 11th house of friendships. So spouses starting off as friends and then growing from there. You've got really supportive relationship dynamics in your chart. The issue is, what happens when you strap on your backpack and you start seeking this truth that's just gnawing at you from the inside out? We need to be aware that you need to take people along for that ride to check you. You cannot do this alone. You might fear putting them in danger, and that fear putting them in danger is actually a cue that you're in danger, girl. So we need to be aware that really not doing things solo, not being that lone wolf, surrounding yourself with friends who can check you and honestly provide that helpful friction of like, no, this is not necessarily a good idea. No, this is not necessarily safe. No, you're not thinking about yourself the right way. You're not approaching this in the correct mindset. We need to have those checks and balances in terms of people kind of bumper railing you to make sure that you're not getting in over your head as that ninth of higher learning and that 12th of hidden enemies tends to go for. You tend to want to bite off the head of the Hydra, but we know from that myth that the minute that one head is chopped off, 2 or 3 or 5 or 8 more take its place. So the more you have friends to help you battle those monsters, I think the better you'll be able to mitigate some of the danger in your chart and allow yourself to flourish by friends really reminding you how awesome you actually are, because you're very talented and tenacious, which is all those Scorpios in the 12th. Lovely. So that was super fun. Thank you everybody for jumping on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate it. Yes, if you'd like to submit your birth date, place, and time to me via private message, I will add you to the queue or set up a private consult with me at scorpiorisingastrology.com. Alrighty, next one. Here we go. Rick was born at 6:15 a.m. in Elmira. This time we've also got Jupiter ruling the ascendant. We've got an ascendant in Pisces conjoining the sun with Jupiter up in Sag up in the 10th. That's glorious. So here's what I love about doing these live things is the 8 charts that I've taken are totally random. It's totally in order of what time you requested you be added to the queue. So I don't know who's when until the morning of, and then I don't look at the charts, but they all seem to have a common theme. And right now Jupiter is coming forward as the common theme. So Jupiter is the luckiest and most abundant planet of our astrological makeup. And so to have Jupiter in a positive relationship or ruling the ascendant is an excellent thing. It definitely adds that little bit of luck that I think is just what a lot of people look for in their lives. Because the sun in Pisces is conjoining the ascendant, there is a little bit of an ego boost. When we look at the sun and the ascendant as 2 major markers of personality, the personality is double Pisces is a good way to say it. So instead of just having a little bit of water, we've got a lot more water because of that sun and that ascendant being so close. Ruled up by Jupiter in Sagittarius, it's one of the signs that it rules up in the 10th. Fame is naturally part of Rick's chart. I think that's a really interesting marker just to see, is that you've put the ruler of your chart in the 10th house of success and career. Not only is that a very important part of your life, but constantly seeking to be in the limelight, wanting to be famous or known for who you are, is part of your energetic makeup. We do have the moon in Aries in the 2nd house of finance. That's always fun. Mercury is in Aries. Venus is also in Aries. South Node is in Aries. A lot of money stuff in the chart. And when we look at the ruler of money stuff, Mercury and Mars are in mutual reception. So ding ding, that's points for Rick. But it basically means that the 4th house of family and the 2nd house of finance are intimately connected. This could go either way. And this is what I tell clients, is that we just need to be aware that these 2 places in your life are connected. There is no separating them. Now, this could be a give and take situation in many different ways. Family could rush to your aid financially and lend you money at certain points of your life, or getting financial backing from the family, or you could also take, during your high points, all of the cash that you've saved up and pump it into your family dynamic, or distribute that into the family wealth system. But the idea that there's a constant flow of money from you to your family and from your family to you, there is a circular energy that happens between your financial house and your 4th house. Yeah. Also deriving, because the fourth house isn't just about family, it's also about the home. Deriving income from real estate or investment properties is part of that dynamic as well, which is super fun. But the moon in Aries in the second really just talks about money as being on the heart on a regular basis. And that's part of Rick's makeup as well. Mars and Gemini in the fourth is a little bit of a tricky placement when we see that in the family and home dynamic. Again, the idea of owning two homes because of Gemini, but also the Mars component does leave a little bit of anger, aggression, combative tendencies, warlike tendencies, especially verbal assaults in the family dynamic. So you just need to be aware that family tends to use words as weapons, is what I see a lot with Gemini in Mars and Gemini in the fourth. But because there is mitigation between the second, I think that a lot of it has to do with just pent up money stress, is one of the big triggers for family to open up that Mars. And likewise, the minute that you start talking about family in the middle of a money discussion, the money starts to heat up and starts to activate and starts to do funny things. So that's a really cool part of Rick's chart, a very interesting dynamic indeed. We do have Saturn and Capricorn in the 11th. Saturn is an interesting planet because wherever it is, it makes things a little bit slower, a little bit heavier, a little bit denser, but higher quality as well. And that would be a good way to describe Rick's social circle. He tends to socialize with people who are older, more mature. That doesn't necessarily need to be age wise, but it can be just mindset wise. A very refined approach to friendship is what Saturn and Capricorn in the 11th tends to dictate. However, because Saturn does also rule the 12th house of hidden enemies, we do need to be careful. And I think that's something that Rick has understood over time as his chart has progressed and as he approaches the second Saturn return, is just because somebody is in your social circle does not mean that they should be trusted. And that Saturn tends to be very suspicious, tends to be very restrictive when it comes to friendships, but that is also one of the it's also a good quality because Saturn realizes it rules that 12th house of hidden enemies, so it understands like, hey, you might seem nice on the surface, but I still don't trust you. You need to put it forward. You need to tell me exactly over time. Prove yourself to me. What is it that you're actually about? I think that's actually a very valuable approach to friendship. When we have Pluto in Virgo, one of the generational planets in the seventh house of relationships, it is retrograde, ruled by that Mercury in Aries in the second of finance. So the idea that also one of the topics that will be connected is finance into relationships. Which, I mean, some people understand that connection a little bit more than others, but in this scenario, it's not the mutual reception that we saw between family and money. This time it's one-sided. Mercury in the planet of finance is ruling Pluto in Virgo retrograde in the seventh. So you being the primary breadwinner and supporting a spouse, but also Pluto being here, relationships that you choose are very long term. Pluto only matures when it's 50. It really is in it for that long haul. So it's not necessarily one of those fling-like relationships. Virgo is also very specific about what it prefers, who it prefers to be around, and why it prefers those things. So I think that picky relationship tendencies and money funneling into the relationship, it's really about investing in somebody when it comes to choosing a partner for you, and understanding that the person that you choose to invest in, it's not going to be like mint growing in the garden where mint just pops up everywhere and there's no end to it if you let it get out of control. You're watering an avocado tree, like something that doesn't bloom and produce fruit for a very long time after it's planted. Like that's the energy of your relationship house, is that really deep ingrained partnership that does not separate easily. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Those are some pretty core topics of Rick's chart. But when in doubt, going back to that double Pisces energy with Jupiter ruling the ascendant, that's a pretty sweet placement. Not gonna lie. Excellent. Thank you everybody for jumping on. We've got Ireland in the house. We've got the UK in the house. We've got so many different people jumping on Facebook and Instagram. Hello, hello, everyone. If you would like to submit your chart, just private message me. Don't post your birth dates in the comments because that's violating privacy. Let's look at Harriet. Harriet was born 5:50 p.m. in Ipswich. And we've got a double Virgo this time around. Love me some Virgo energy. Absolutely love it. So we've got the ascendant and the moon in Virgo. Very, very tight connection. However, plot twist. We do have the sun in Pisces opposing the ascendant. So that's tricky. That's tricky, Harriet. We've got the planet that rules the ego in Pisces in the house of relationships, and it is opposing the ascendant in Virgo. So your meticulous nature, your need to find order, your need to make sure that everything is in its proper place. Whenever I think of Virgo, I always think of mise en place, that phrase, everything in its proper place. And that directly opposes your sun in Pisces in the 7th. I think your ego is searching for the ideal relationship, but who you are as a person is not necessarily supportive of that. And we need to look at other factors as well. Yeah, and the Lord of the chart as well, Mercury in Pisces in the 7th house too. The partner that you choose will be very, very different from who you are. And in some ways will help you grow as a person, and in other ways will make you feel absolutely smothered, because trying to control a Pisces partner is not easy. All of the water signs are known for being rather ambiguous and emotionally reclusive, but Pisces especially, because it is the mutable water sign. So that idea of you trying to balance the chaos of your partner, not going to work, not going to happen. It's more about surrender and acceptance, which are two traits that I think irritate the hell out of Virgo, but also are traits that I think Virgo really, really, really needs to learn. You do have an upper hand with the ruler of the chart being in the 7th from a understanding perspective, but just recognize, Harriet, with the partner that you choose, there will be dynamics that will always be out of your control with them, especially emotionally. So lay back and enjoy the ride. Enjoy it for what it is. Don't try to interject, change, fiddle, fix. Ooh, don't try to fix your partner. That's a really great message for that Virgo placement, opposing the sun in Pisces in the 7th. Let's see. So that relationship house is ruled by Jupiter in the 8th in Aries. So you might marry a partner who has a financial background, who has a background in the business, but also death. So marrying a hospice worker, somebody who's a mortician who works with anatomy, dissections, cadavers, that kind of stuff, organ transplants, even EMT would fall in here as well. But because that 7th house of relationship is ruled by the 8th house of death, taxes, estates, we might find that you marry an estate attorney or somebody who deals with those 8th house topics. They will also be a rather big personality. When you go big, or when you think of relationships, Harry, you go big. So it's somebody who's probably going to be very grandiose, somebody who's very famous for what they do as well. Let's look at some other stuff. Because Jupiter is ruling the 7th, but Mars in Taurus in the 9th is ruling Jupiter, your spouse will love to travel. That's not necessarily something that you'll love to do, but it is something that you will do for work, because we have Venus ruling the 9th house of travel in the 6th house of work. Yeah, so that's fun. I think that that's something that you might grow to love, Harriet, is the idea of travel, because your spouse will kind of pull you into that space, but then also your work will kind of pull you into that space. And we need to respect that not all things can happen on your home turf. Yeah. And especially bringing in that Virgo ascendant, the idea that home turf is, again, what you've taken the time to control, what you've taken the time to put in place, what you've kind of fiddled with until you're absolutely happy with it and it's all feng shuied. And then your work, your partner kind of uproot you and put you into this environment where you have to start from scratch. That is therapeutic. That is therapeutic to you specifically, because it is something that you will need to learn how to do in this lifetime, is not control the chaos, but be one with the chaos. Yes. What else do we have? We have that Gemini. Yeah, that Mercury in. I keep saying Gemini instead of Mercury. Whenever we have Mercury ruling the 10th house, that also is a good. That is a good indicator that spousal connections will be in the business world, and potentially medical world, especially with that 8th house theme. But because Gemini is also in the 10th house of career, it wouldn't surprise me if your spouse was a business person. Yeah. So that's that. What else shall we look at? Let's look at 5th house of creativity, ruled by 4th house of family and home. One of the pleasures that you get is out of reorganizing your home. Like, don't think that just because it's the 10th time that you've moved your couch around Harriet does not mean that you don't go for the 11th. If that's what makes you happy, if that's what discharges your stress, then you go for it. You go for it, girl. Move that couch, get that feng shui, put up some mirrors, create that ideal environment to unlock your creativity. Because we have that 5th house of creativity ruled by Saturn in that 4th house of home. I think interior decorating might be a really fun creative outlet for you, or getting into that feng shui space. Jupiter in the 8th is also ruling that 4th house of creativity. That's fun. Yeah, so home-based business. Your spouse working from home, because again, this is what I love about astrology, is it's kind of like going down a rabbit hole. And when we look at the ruler of this house is in this house, and then the ruler of that house is in this house, your spouse is in your 7th, ruled by the 8th house of business, death, taxes, estates, which is being ruled, which is ruling the 4th house of home and house. So that's a really interesting dynamic for just a home-based business partnership. And again, especially because you tend to rearrange your house on a regular basis, that might piss off your partner just a little bit. But if you can explain to them that it's not just helping you, it's also helping them energetically, I think you'll be in a better spot than if they wake up one morning and the house is completely different. Okie dokie. Thanks, Rick. Thank you, everybody, for submitting your birth details and for messaging me privately. Just trying to filter through all those comments as well. Thank you, everybody who's watching on Instagram and Facebook. Feel free to follow my daily posts on Instagram and Facebook if you'd like. My Facebook is Sam Bellier for those of you on Instagram, and for those of you on Facebook, it's Scorpio Rising Astrology on Instagram. Alrighty, here we go. We're about halfway. How are we doing on time? Yeah, we're halfway at about halfway. Excellent. Let's look at Emily's chart. Emily was born at 4:54 p.m. in New London. Let's take a peek. Let's take a gander, shall we? So we've got a Cancer ascendant. Whoa, and an Aquarius stellium in the 8th. That's fun. Crazy town. Okay, we get to dig into Emily's chart really nicely. Ooh, and a mutual reception with Mars in Aquarius and Saturn in Aries. Girl, I love it. You've got some fun placements. That's delicious. So we've got Venus in Aquarius, Uranus in Aquarius, the Moon in Aquarius, Mars in Aquarius, and Jupiter in Aquarius, all in the 8th house of death, taxes, estates, and business. So that's fun. Because the moon is here and the moon is the Lord of the Ascendant, Emily, you are absolutely 100% tied and connected to that world. That world of the eighth house is not a space that a lot of people feel comfortable navigating because they're very uncomfortable topics. Death is not really great. Accounting, taxes, estates, not really easy to manage. Also, business, it's foreign to a lot of people. Even people who go to school to study business don't necessarily understand how business works. But you get how business works, don't you, Emily? Especially with that mutual reception between Mars in the 8th and Saturn in the 10th, making entrepreneurship one of your personal passions. So that's super fun. I always like to see. I know that Mars is technically in its detriment in Aries, or not Mars. Saturn. I know Saturn is technically in its detriment in Aries, opposing its exaltation in Libra. But I do find that there is something special about Saturn in Aries, because Saturn in Aries is a little bit reckless and impulsive, but Saturn being reckless and impulsive is different from Mars being reckless and impulsive. And you've put restriction on your Mars by putting it in Aquarius, and you've put kind of gunpowder underneath Saturn's butt to get it to be active, because Saturn is normally very slow and very stoic and not prone towards action. And I think that you've done that very strategically in your chart and put them in business-oriented houses, which I think is absolutely wonderful. So I think that's a marker for success right off the bat. I think you've got the chutzpah for it. I think that you've got that drive, that hunger in your blood that will really help you to move forward from a business perspective. Yeah, and we do have Jupiter in the 8th ruling that 6th house of work. When we look at some work skills that Emily has, as well as some health stuff, that's interesting. We've got a blood sugar marker from a medical perspective for Emily. We need to be a little bit careful with that, especially because she's got so much stacked in Aquarius. When I see Sagittarius and Aquarius going back and forth, there's a chance for peripheral neuropathy or referred pain due to blood sugar issues. When the body doesn't have the fuel that it needs, Emily, it will often create systemic nerve pain. And that's something that you just need to be aware of in your chart. So if we feed you properly and you don't skip a meal, because again, having that Cancer ascendant, you love to eat, girl. But then putting that moon in Aquarius with all that stellium, you love to restrict your meals, girl. And we just need to be aware that that's not necessarily healthy, especially if physical symptoms start to become present in the nerves. So that could be tingling in the fingers, tingling in the toes, weird referral pains down the extremities, because Aquarius rules the peripheral nervous system. And we have that Lord of the... we have Jupiter in Aquarius, and then we also have Mercury in Sagittarius, the sign of the liver. So just being aware of that connection physically, health-wise, and that Mercury in Sag is in the 6th house of health. But from a work career, from a work perspective, you do have some really interesting skills. Having Mercury and Sagittarius in the 6th house of work makes you extremely versatile skill-wise. It really allows you to learn things quickly. It allows your very curious mind to latch onto new talents relatively fast, and impress people with your ability to acquire those new talents at a rate that few people do. And I think that this is something that will be more and more present throughout your life, because you have Pluto here, one of those long-term planets that matures over time. I think that skill of skill acquisition is a good way to think about it, will be more and more valuable as you grow older, because you'll understand what needs to be let go of skill-wise, what needs to be absorbed skill-wise, and you'll have the energy to do it. So that's fabulous. I love it. In the house of relationships, we have the Sun in Capricorn and Neptune in Capricorn being ruled by that Saturn in the 10th. So because you're so much in that business entrepreneurial space, I think that you'll also marry into that lineage as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if you seek a partner who's able to go toe-to-toe with you business-wise. and is in that same realm that you have put yourself in, especially if you marry somebody or have a deep foundational partnership with somebody who is in the same field that you work in. That would make you feel very safe, very comfortable, because they would just kind of get it and provide you the positive friction that only two business owners in a relationship can, where you bounce ideas off of each other and you start to tear each other's throats out over those new ideas, and then you realize that the other was right and you apologize and you love each other because of that positive, helpful tension that only somebody in an entrepreneurial situation would really appreciate. So yeah, that's fun. Well done, Emily. Love your chart. Okie dokie, let's go ahead and continue reading. We've got Shanna. We'll go with Shanna. So Shanna's up next. Shanna's at 3:28 a.m. And I'm sorry, hun, I know that you sent me, and this is Shanna via Instagram. I know that you sent me the exact birthplace, but the closest that I could get in my software was Sydney. But you are very close to Sydney. It wouldn't be a time difference there, I don't think. So yeah, we've got it for 3:28 a.m. in Sydney, which is very close to, I think it was Westford, but it's in that same area of New South Wales. So we've got a Scorpio ascendant, woo, Scorpio rising, and the ruler of, oh goodness, honey, yeah, so the ruler of that Scorpio ascendant is Mars in Libra in the 12th house of hidden enemies. So back to that idea that we talked about in the beginning of the live stream, and something that really came up in yesterday's stream as well. Go back and watch that if you haven't on the YouTube channel. When the ruler of the ascendant is in the 12th house of hidden enemies, we just need to be very, very aware that the self is compromised. We need to be very aware that your sense of who you are as a person can attack you for no good reason. So surrounding yourself with people who are naturally going to uplift you, very, very, very important, so that you don't get your own goat, especially because Mars is in Libra, the sign of its detriment, or the sign of its fall, rather. And Mars in Libra likes to come up with a million different excuses and execute on none of them. It's really pushing out that worst indecision of Libra, because Mars puts the fire behind the air, and Libra's about options. Libra likes to consider. And so having your ascendant ruled by that over consideration of the 12th house of hidden enemies brings a little bit of paranoia, a little bit of self-doubt, things that we would need to rectify by really looking at other placements in your chart for mediation. One of the ways that you can rectify your sense of self is actually by throwing yourself into your work and loving what you do. We've got, yeah, and I think that that's something, oh, you're naturally gifted in the health field. That's cool. Because that Mars is in the 12th, being in hospitals, ruling the ascendant. But then we also have Saturn ruled by Aries, in Aries, ruled by that Mars in the 12th and the 6th house of health. So yeah, a career in the health professions would actually do you really, really good. It would certainly take you out of your own stuff, allow you to project that sense of like, what about this? 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 What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? What about this? How about that? And you really put that on somebody else, which can be very, very useful in a triage situation for you to consider all of the contraindications, all of the medical interactions, all of the different things that could go wrong during a surgery, all of those opportunities for life to kind of kick you in the butt are very applicable in a medical situation, I think. So that would be one way to kind of discharge and activate your sun to mitigate the ascendant being in a compromised spot, is by throwing yourself into a health-based career profession. So that would be fun. We've got, oh, yeah, that's nice. That's really lovely, Shanna. We've got Jupiter in Pisces can join the moon in Pisces in the 5th house of creativity, children, sexuality. I think personally that's a lovely placement, honey. And I really think that one of the hidden joys of your life might actually be children. I think that you have this parental nurturing side, you have this super creative side. Like an ideal situation for you to emotionally recharge would be fantasizing about, finger painting with your kids, or taking your kids to art camp, or doing like a mommy and me painting class. That kind of wholesome but creative entertainment is really something that I think your chart shines really, really well with, having that Pisces Jupiter, which is just so lucky and so lovely, in that fifth house of creativity, sexuality, and parenting. So I love that. I think that's a beautiful placement. That's the most positive placement in your chart. So I think, again, like if you want something to emotionally recharge with, that's where you go, is that fifth house. Then let's talk about the Sun in Capricorn and Venus in Capricorn in the third. That third house of writing, teaching, communication, neighbors, siblings, has the Sun in Capricorn. So we do have some ego stuff here. Venus is here as well, but Venus is in Capricorn. So think about the Sun being bright and shiny and radiant, and think about Venus as being lovely and like all kissy and affectionate. But picture both of those energies chilled out and hardened and focused by Capricorn. So the Sun really doesn't get to shine as bright. Venus doesn't get to be as affectionate, but they're focused in a way that they can get things done. And that's what I think you're bringing into that third house of siblings, especially like holding back your love from siblings, because you know that if you treated them the way that you were feeling, it would all go to their heads. Like it's a practical withdrawal of love. A practical withdrawal of love. That's a great way to describe Venus and Capricorn. I think that's awesome. Good stuff. But because we have the Sun here, an identification with writing, teaching, and communication is something that is naturally in your chart, because you have that medical tilt to your chart, and we have the Sun being ruled by Capricorn in the third, potentially taking your experiences in the field and writing about them, and writing from a medical perspective about what you've seen in order to teach and share the knowledge that you've accrued. I think that would be a smart move. What else? We've got one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and that's the connection between the fifth house and the second house. So we've got Jupiter in the fifth, parents, creativity, sexuality, children, parents, and then we've got that ruling the second house of finance. So one of the things that I really enjoy thinking about with a chart is future and present stuff. So one of the things that this chart is prone to when it comes to children, should you grab a hold and get some children, Shauna, don't actually grab children, Shauna, that's not appropriate. But if you were to have children of your own, I think that one of the things that you might be shocked at is how much money it is to raise children. But also, as your chart matures, one of the things that you'll notice is that your children become very successful and give that money back to you. And that really goes back to Rick's chart about the idea of financially investing in your relationships. And children aren't just about that emotional comfort. They're also an investment in your future. And I think that you passing on your skills to the next generation and fostering that parenting dynamic in your chart will fulfill you emotionally, although suck you dry financially, potentially. However, down the road, the success of your children will actually support you financially. And that's something that I think a lot of people worry about, but you've naturally got a really great placement with in your chart. However, you won't see that return way until way down the line. We're talking about like 50, because we've got Pluto here in Sag. Okie dokie. Fun stuff. I know a lot of you with that last question of what do you mean children cost money? What do you mean raising a child costs money? I love you, Alex. So funny. Emily says, yes, thank you. She's currently in medical billing, but not sure if it's for me. Yeah, stuff like that. Really, really interesting when we see how the chart comes to life as we unpack these. We've got just over 10 minutes to go over 2 charts, so let's move on. So let's go to Jenny. Jenny was born at 1:30 a.m. in Flint. She's got a Sagittarius. Man, Jupiter just really coming through hard today. And again, Jupiter in the fifth. Goodness gracious, honey. So let's talk about Jupiter, if we haven't already. So Jupiter ruling the ascendant in the fifth house of parents, children, creativity, sexuality. Really funny how these charts just seem to pop up one after another. So the over-identification with or the personal attachment to, because the ascendant is being ruled by that Jupiter in Aries in the fifth, which means that children, sexuality, parenting, big part of your makeup, Jenny. I think that that's a core part of who you are. We've got a lot of creative energy because Jupiter is in Aries here. Your art may take on an aggressive tint or be one of the ways that you choose to discharge your anger. I think it would be really funny if you tapped into your anger as a medium and that allowed your creativity to flow. But because we have the Lord of the Ascendant in the fifth house of parenting, creativity, sexuality, children, that's going to be one of your core identifying markers and really understanding that that's a big part of who you are as a person. Yeah. Despite the fact that we have the Sun in Pisces and Mercury in Pisces retrograde in the fourth, ouch. This has been a really difficult time for you, Jenny, not gonna lie, with that Mercury retrograde that just blew through your fourth house of family and home. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if, because Pisces was involved, the water systems in your house really getting a makeover, potentially like bursting a pipe, which I've seen with Mercury retrograde in the fourth. But because you've already got Mercury retrograde in Pisces in the fourth, like, that's doubled down for you, really compromising to the ego since February. But Mercury has now moved into Aries, lighting up your creativity. So that transit is done, thankfully. But there is still a lot of that wishy-washiness in your fourth house of family and home that I think needs to be respected and understood, because that fifth house of creativity, sexuality, parenting is connected to the fourth house. Again, feng shui might be a really neat way to discharge your creativity, but also taking care of your kids at home, being a stay-at-home mom, something that I think that you would do very, very well at, especially because that fifth house of parenting is ruled by Mars and Taurus, that sixth house of work. Ooh, okay, we need to talk about this. Yes, we need to talk about this. So we've got that Mars in Taurus in the ninth house of work, health, pets, but we also have that in a direct opposition to Pluto in Scorpio retrograde in the 12th. Unfortunately, this is a sign of medical emergency for at work specifically, so incurring injuries on the job, or traumatic injuries, especially to the neck, because Taurus rules the neck, ligaments, as well as metabolism issues or thyroid issues, potential allergic reactions as well, because the throat tends to swell first, and Taurus rules that throat. So that's something that I would watch out for, is especially children having allergic reactions on your watch. But there being this really slightly ominous medical hovering around the family, the home, that we just need to be super aware of. Like, never go anywhere without a first aid kit, Jenny. Always be aware of the potential for there to be an injury wherever you go, because that's something that you just seem to attract in your chart, I think, because of that opposition to Pluto. That's pretty intense, not gonna lie. Let's see, Moon in Gemini in the 7th, ruled by that Mercury in Pisces in the 4th. So partner having that emotional flittiness that Gemini is known for, because we look at the 7th house of relationships as the embodiment of the potential partner. So when we see the moon representing emotions and Gemini having that kind of two extremes, positive, negative, constantly going forth between dark and light, and really understanding that bipolar tendency that Gemini tends to embody, that's part of the quality that your partner will naturally have. Yeah, so that's super fun, but it is being ruled by that Mercury in Pisces in the fourth. So we might have some issues with you being a stay-at-home parent, or the the partner being the stay-at-home parent and that actually being the role that you would like to take. But it just doesn't work out because you might be the major breadwinner. Let's look at your financial house for that. Yeah, especially because you've got Saturn in the first house of self ruling that second house of finance and that third house of writing, teaching, communication. I think that you have a lot of really important skills when it comes to financial acquisition, and you just naturally pull money to you, although you don't necessarily understand how that works because Neptune is here. There's a little bit of muddiness with that, but the more that you do well, the more your finances do well, and especially because Venus, a very positive planet, is in that writing, teaching, communication. Anything that you do with the written word is going to have a cash bonus for you. Or if you identify as being a teacher, writer, communicator, that's something that I think is really, really part of your makeup as well. Yeah, that's a lot. I've been babbling. I feel like I've been babbling a lot about this chart. There are just so many dynamics because all the planets are spread out and they're all referring to one another. But I think that's the major thing is watching that fifth house of creativity, parenting children, ruled by that fourth house of home, and then that Mars opposing Jupiter for potential catastrophic medical situations that need to be managed relatively quickly, especially allergic reactions, things involving the neck, throat, and metabolism. Yay. Okie dokie. Let's go ahead and let's continue to talk about the chart. We've got about 5 more minutes, and we've got one more chart to go. So let's go ahead and look at Michelle. Michelle was born at 7:32 a.m. in Tampa, Florida. So we have Aries on the ascendant being ruled by Mars in Aquarius in the 11th, not exactly conjoined, but in close proximity to Venus in Aquarius. That's a great placement. Because we have the ascendant ruler in that 11th house of friendships, social groups, tribes. That's something that Michelle identifies with very heavily, is finding her tribe, surrounding herself with her people, understanding that especially because we see Venus and Mars here in very, very close proximity. The idea of gender relations between social groups, being very active in the trans community. That's something that I see a lot with Venus and Mars in the 11th house of social groups. We've also got the North Node here, so it's not something that's going to escape Michelle throughout her entire life. It's going to be something that she constantly strives to achieve, something that she's actually learning to master, are those dynamics between people and social groups that involve gender norms. I think that's a good way to say it, because we've got that, again, Venus and Mars together, those two signs of opposite gender together in the 11th house of community involvement. Yeah, so here's where the relationship dynamics then come in from that, because we have a little bit of an issue here. The moon is at 3 degrees opposing the ascendant, but it's making a trine to both Mars and Venus, and being ruled by Venus. The idea that you have as well a trans partner, or somebody who works in that same level of community activism that you do, somebody who works with that same fervor that you do to make sure that all people are created equal, and that the tribe, that Aquarius tribe that really resonates with you, is part of your relationship dynamic as well. The issue is that we do have a little bit of a problem with Mars being involved, ruling the ascendant, making that trine to the moon. Technically a good placement, but when I've seen this, especially with Venus getting involved, there's this really sweet side and there's this really aggressive side to both to your partners, and it's like all of a sudden there's the syrup and then all of a sudden there's the heat, and it's like sometimes you don't know which you're going to get on any given day. And if we piss off that Mars a little bit too much, if heat starts to build in the relationship, that can be technically slightly abusive, especially to the nervous system. But Venus can also step in at any given moment and soothe those wounds. So that kind of going back and forth between the hot and the cold, hot and the cold, hot and the cold in relationships is something that we just need to be a little bit aware of. And it's not like your relationship pool is stifled in any way, shape, or form, honey, because you've got all of these social dynamics that you've just embedded into your chart that I think just make you such a social person. It's not like you couldn't have your pick of the litter if you tried. Then we have this Jupiter in Cancer in the fourth. Absolutely fabulous. Oh my God. So Jupiter is in its exaltation in Cancer, which is a beautiful thing to put into the fourth house of home and family. Family is everything. Yeah. When it comes to your chart, I think that also because we have a connection between the seventh house and the fourth house. That's always nice. Whenever I see the fourth house of family being ruled by the seventh house of relationships, the people in your family will be the ones to introduce your partners to you. And that should be a really good check for you, is the people who you consider your family, actually looking through your partners first and being like, yeah, I like this one. Or even if you're looking for somebody else to bring into your life, ask around and ask specifically the people in your immediate family circle to look for you, because they'll be a better judge of character about who you should have in your life, just because they're a little bit detached. But because you have that Jupiter in Cancer here, only good things can come from Jupiter in Cancer placements. And you've put that in your house of family and home. And so that's an area that you would really go to kind of bathe in those exalted waters that Jupiter really brings into your life, that luck, that abundance, that care, that family. However, one of the things that we just need to be aware of about Michelle's chart is we have that Saturn in Capricorn, Neptune, Uranus, and the MC all in Capricorn in the 10th house. So work and career is going to be something that is over the long haul. Authority issues as well, working in the social dynamic space, but potentially having to work through multiple glass ceilings in order to really push through the hardness, the restriction, the chaos, the inappropriate rules, the backwards thinking that Uranus and Neptune bring to that equation of career. But because that Saturn in Capricorn in the 10th of career is ruling that 11th house of the social groups, the friendships, I think that there is a really good work dynamic. I just think that there's going to be some hidden challenges, some challenges that you'll only really understand, like, oh, that's why I couldn't get that job, or oh, that's why I wasn't promoted, or oh, that's why they wouldn't do this project. And it's all stupid, petty stuff that you're really here to bust through in your lifetime, is understanding how the connections with the people around you are really what trump anything else. Like, your power, like you're the care bearer of friendship, is a good way to think about it. But when that comes to a work dynamic, you've got some specific career placements that I think are just a little bit dangerous when it comes to people getting in your way for no goddamn reason. And if you can use your connections to override that and to really beat the system through social power, I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind for your chart. We do have the sun in the 12th. We do have Mercury in Pisces in the 12th. So this has been a really rough time for Michelle as well, exposing her house of hidden enemies, people coming back into her life, which mean her no good intentions and only wish her harm, despite that maybe not being seen at the offset, because that 12th house is ruled by the fourth, by Jupiter in the fourth. Snakes tend to come pretty close, and that's a difficult placement, especially when you think that they're there to bolster your ego, but instead they're actually there to tear you down. But again, because you're constantly surrounded by people, places, and things that are just so forward thinking and are so loving and creative, I think that it's not necessarily about you choosing one person, but kind of basking in the collective love that you've chosen for yourself, as opposed to trusting one person too much or confiding in one person. that's kind of a law of dissemination where we look at Pisces and Aquarius having the same quality. Pisces and Aquarius are more about the collective. And so when we look at a lot of your relationships, your friendships, your intimate relationships, your family being a part of that larger collective, it's difficult for your ego to want to reach in and say, you're mine, as opposed to what you actually should be doing, which is saying, we are together. Yeah, which is about you recognizing that Aquarian-ness of your 11th house and saying it's not necessarily about one person. It's about how the community operates and me being a part of that community, but also an individual within that community, and not trusting anybody who wants to isolate you from that natural talent and that natural connection that you have, which I think is so beautiful. Okie dokie. So that's fun. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on with me for another live cast. I appreciate these opportunities. Again, if you would like to submit your birth chart for this little experiment, this little project that's been going on for over a week now, every single day at 10:30, just send me via private message your birth date, place, and exact birth time, and we will put you into the queue. If you would also like to schedule a consult with me, you can always do so via ScorpioRisingAstrology.com and check out the links to my online school, which has classes on the houses and the signs and planets and interpreting your moon and my weekly forecast. Lots of fun resources for you to dig into. And I'll put a link to the recording of this live stream and the YouTube channel if you'd like to look at previous recordings and suck some of the messages out of previous readings that I've given via that YouTube channel link. Have a fantastic rest of your moon day. And now I get to say my favorite phrase, may the stars be ever in your favor.